My fretboards have arrived, but just before I cut the shape of the neck out and then attach the fretboard, what I will do first, because it's easier before you shape the neck, is route the channel for the truss rod, which I'll do on my workbench, which I designed for this very purpose. Now, I detailed how I did this on my previous video series on making a neck from scratch, so I won't go through all the details again, except to say that this time I'm not using my sash clamps, which are leaning up in the corner there, as a railing. I'm just using the remaining piece of redwood, which is massive, just because it was handy. So I'll go ahead and route that out now. So I've routed, most of the channel. Well, I've routed the full length of the channel, along with some access here for adjusting. Now I just need to route a slightly wider part here to accommodate the adjuster. So I'll just swap out my router bit for a slightly bigger one, and then we'll be in business. And there it is, all done. So I've routed a slightly wider, deeper part there for the adjuster to sit in. I might make that look a bit nicer there where the access is had. I'm not sure how. One thing I inadvertently did is make the channel ever so slightly longer than I needed to, from the tip at that end to the end of the adjuster at this end, so that it would actually move slightly, and you certainly don't want your truss rod rattling around inside your neck. That would be terrible. So I have filled the space there with a piece of matai. Even on jobs that no one's going to see, use quality wood. Well, you don't have to, but you should. Take some pride in your work. I think it was an oversight on my part that I haven't yet attached the Australian oak layer to the headstock. And I call it an oversight because I am going to want that access port to run all the way through the oak. So really it would have been better if the oak was there when I was routing that out. So I am going to go ahead and leave the neck in the position to be routed out, I think. No, that's going to get in the way, isn't it? Bother. Okay, I'll take it out of here, and then I will glue the oak layer on, and then I'll think about how I'm going to cut that access port, whether I'll put the neck back in to the routing jig that I have set up, or whether I will drill or file or what have you. Let's find out. So I'm using weld bond glue, which I have used in the past for gluing on fretboards, or a fretboard. It's very good. For the large joints, so far I've been using Gorilla Glue, but for smaller joins, is it a join? Of course it's a join, isn't it? Yes. For joins like this, smaller ones, I'm using weld bond, and that will be good in this case because Gorilla Glue would expand into that channel there, and I really wouldn't want that. So let's get this glue on. Now I've already sanded this down to 240 grit, which is pretty smooth, but I'm sure I will sand it further. No, I want to get glue on. Well, I'll have to sand it now if I get glue on the front of it, which I really don't want to do. Okay, now Now I get to try out my spring clamps, which I bought some of today. It's not absolutely crucial to be, well, maybe it is crucial to be centered to get the book match down the middle of the headstock. Wow, there's a lot of power on these. And they are ideal for this job, but I will put a couple of F-clamps in the middle so that that part doesn't get neglected when it comes to the application of force. Need more clamps. I have more clamps. You can't really do overkill with this. Overkill is good. You just want to put as much force on, well, within reason. You want to put lots of force across as much of the area as you possibly can. One more should do us. You know, I'm just going to go and get a couple more spring clamps for the edges. And our diversity committee tells me that they're offended because I have excluded G clamps. So I'll just go and get one of those. Okay, look, if that's not clamped up enough, then nothing is. So I will leave that overnight and see how it looks tomorrow. Alright, well, all the clamps are off. The weld bond glue appears to have performed admirably, as I would have expected from the last time that I used it. It forms clear and very hard. So I'm just going to go to the bandsaw now and cut off the excess from this oak layer. I haven't actually come up with a design yet for this headstock. I don't know that I will use the one that I already have. I don't think it would suit this guitar. Well, at any rate, I wish to come up with a new one, so I will. As an illustration of two things, number one, why it would have been better to have the oak on the headstock at an earlier stage, and number two, an illustration of my silliness. Okay, so here's the scenario. So I put the oak onto the fretboard just now, onto the neck just now, or the headstock part, and I commented earlier that it would have been better to have it on sooner, so that when I was routing the truss rod channel it would go through the oak as well, whereas now I have to make access separately for the oak, through the oak, after I put the oak on. And I'll show you how I'm doing that in just a moment. I've already started here. But, so when the oak was on, it was like that. So the corner of the flat piece of oak stuck up here and I had to remove that. The right way to remove it was how I ultimately did it, which was firstly via some very coarse sanding, and then some finer sanding and planing, and now that's nicely level with the surface of the neck on which the fretboard will sit. But one dumb thing that I did, and maybe I would have done a better job if I was just generally better with the bandsaw, is I thought maybe I could bandsaw along here and cut it off, which isn't a completely crazy idea. But then I said to myself, well, I'll make it easy for myself. Imagine this is the blade of the bandsaw, and I'll just do a cut here to get the end of the oak off, and I cut just a fraction too far and touched the wood. So now there's some filler in there where I made a cut, and I'll put a little bit more in there. Now, you won't see that. You may see a little from the side, but hardly. It is kind of wood-ish colour, and the reason you won't see it, of course, is that the fretboard will be on top, and I'll be cutting off those parts anyway, so you won't see it. It's just quite irritating that I did something as silly as that. Okay, what I'm doing now is, you may recall, you might not, that earlier I said I would make the access hole just look a bit nicer once I had the oak on. No, I said that before I had the oak on, but now that the oak is on, I'm going to make it look nicer. And I'm doing that just by making it nice and rounded using this round file, which is really the perfect size for this job. So I'm just going to make it a fair bit deeper. And probably using sandpaper I will round the edges of that channel that I'm putting in here, so it will be nice and smooth. But when I'm done with this, I'll have to decide whether I cut the neck out first or design the headstock first and then cut that out. Either way, you'll see me doing that next.